Welcome back to another episode of Explain Yourself. I am once again at the Entomological Society of America's annual conference, where I have found some new victims for us to interview. So this is Madison Sankovitz. She's from the University of California, Riverside, and she studies entomology. So hi. Thanks for being on Explain Yourself.
Yeah, of course.
So you are a PhD student, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
So can you give us sort of like the elevator pitch for your current research?
Yeah, so broadly I study the genetics and ecology of social insects, which are insects that live in colonies like ants and bees and wasps and termites. I mostly focus on ants, and a lot of my dissertation research focuses on how ants impact soil ecosystems. So ants, a lot of them live in the soil, underground, beneath our feet, and they're really busy. I mean, usually it's pretty common to see them whenever you're out walking around, see them on the sidewalk crawling around, but really they're working all the time, even if it might not look like it. And they're going out and they're foraging and they're getting food items, and they're bringing those food items back into their nest. Mm-hmm. And that is nutrients that they're adding to not only to themselves but to the soil that makes up their nest. And then whenever they're constructing their nest, they end up mixing those nutrients eventually into the soil. And so they contribute to nutrient cycling in a really big way. They also aerate soil, so through the tunnels that they dig and through what we call bioturbation, which is soil mixing essentially by ants and other animals. They bring oxygen to plant roots, microorganisms, other macroinvertebrates that live in the soil. And so ants, they live all over the world. They live everywhere except for Antarctica and some islands for the most part. And so they're really doing this everywhere across the globe. And so my research is focused not only on how they're doing this and the extent that they're impacting ecosystems, but also how the specific environment that they're in impacts their ability to be these soil engineers, as we call it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you've got a lot of components to this, which makes sense for
Yeah,
dissertation.
it's sort of complicated, yeah.
So why ants? If you're interested in soil turbation, there are a lot of different groups of insects, other arthropods, and other invertebrates, non-arthropod invertebrates that do this. So why ants?
Yeah, so I guess if we take a step back, for me the question first comes to why insects. I've been interested in insects my whole life. I really liked them as a kid, and I think it really came down to like mostly the aesthetic qualities of insects. They're these really like beautiful, symmetric creatures, and not only that, but they're all over the place, so it's really easy to get your hands on them and take a look at them, and each one of them is like this little action figure almost, where it has I know, right?
I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
That's
like
awesome.
it has its own like unique form and shape and coloration, and they all look so different, and most of them are really beautiful. So I think like that's what originally drew me to insects. And then so ants specifically, people have estimated that ants make up 15 to 20% of all terrestrial animal biomass on Earth. Yeah, I know, it's really crazy.
By biomass, even though each ant individually weighs so much less than a gram.
Right,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
like you would never think that, because they're just like these tiny, almost insignificant things that are like all over the place, and oftentimes they're a pest in people's house and people don't really like them, but yeah, they're everywhere. And the diversity, the species diversity of ants is crazy, and they come in so many different forms as well, like morphological forms. And if you take a look at the ways that ants nest, for example, there's huge, crazy diversity there, where some of them nest in trees and some of them nest in the ground. So I think just as an insect family, that's why they're really interesting. And then getting back to this question of how they're soil engineers. So ants are considered ecosystem engineers, which means that they're an organism that significantly alters or helps maintain their habitat, their physical habitat, and the resource dynamics around where they live. And I think that besides for earthworms, they are one of the main organisms that do this in soil. So that's mostly why I'm looking at them. Although you're right, there are a lot of other really important soil invertebrates that do this type of thing.
Is part of it, as you mentioned, because ants sort of go above ground and bring nutrients like physically back down, whereas like earthworms spend their whole time sort of under?
Right, yeah, I think that's a really big part of it, for sure. And just them being a social insect as well, they have within their colonies this method of allocating tasks to different individuals. And yeah, they're just these machines where they're going, some of them are foraging, some of them are taking care of the brood, some of them are constructing the nest, and as a collective they do act as this really big, just like very complex organism in the soil. You can think of the colony as an organism. So I think that's the other reason why they're really interesting. I can study what they do to the soil, their ecology, but I can also study how their sociality plays into that. That's also part of my dissertation. Looking at how their social organization might impact their ability as ecosystem engineers.
That's something I'm really curious about. Like, you social insects are really fascinating regardless, but yeah, then you think about like, if you watch a single ant on your countertop, like they're kind of stupid, or like they can be, and yet this whole colony, like people throw around the word like superorganism, or that it's like, you know, a hive mind or whatever. So yeah, how does the sociality come into your research, or like what parts of it are you looking at?
Yeah, so I study Formica ants. Formica is a genus of ant, and they are native here in North America and also in parts of Asia and throughout Europe. And they're really ubiquitous here all over the place in North America, and like really easy to sort of get your hands on. So that's like the main reason I study them. Convenient. Don't bite or sting as well. So that's like really nice.
It's really important.
Yeah, but the other reason why they're interesting is that most species of Formica are socially polymorphic, which means that within a species there can be different social forms in different colonies. And by social form, I mostly mean queen number. So in a lot of Formica species, there is a super gene that controls the number of queens that the colony will have.
Whoa.
Or maybe not the exact number, but it'll control whether they have one queen or multiple queens in a colony.
Interesting.
And so single queen colonies are called monogyne colonies, and multi-queen colonies are called polygyne colonies. And so in one species you can have these two different social forms, and this is still very understudied, but we've found that at least in some species, in some areas, this can be geographically separated. So we found in some species of Formica, by elevation, there will be more polygyne colonies at a certain elevation and more monogyne colonies at a certain elevation. So one thing that our lab is trying to do right now is figure out, and I'm in the Purcell lab at UCR, by the way. Yeah, and so we study Formica broadly and their ecology and genetics. But yeah, one thing that we're trying to investigate is what are the environmental factors that play into this social form thing that we have going on, and what are the advantages to different social forms also in different environments, because that's probably playing a role in how this polygyny has evolved. And so with what I'm studying with the ecosystem engineers, I'm looking at how ants are able to alter soil, and I'm doing that along elevational gradients. Because if you study something along an elevational gradient, you can get a lot of colonies, a lot of samples within a relatively small geographic area, but that are experiencing very different abiotic conditions like temperature and precipitation. And so I'm looking at how they're impacting the soil along these gradients, but then also looking at if social form also correlates with that or plays a role in their ability to be ecosystem engineers. And one thing that I think might be sort of playing into all of this is that in these multi-queen polygyne colonies, the colony size is much larger.
Sure.
At least an order of magnitude larger than the monogyne colonies.
Wow.
And so therefore, it would just make sense that those colonies are having a much larger impact on the soil around them, just based on numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you have multiple queens, it's not an additive effect. It actually it's multiplicative.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah.
Are these queens, I guess there are different ways that colonies can be established. So in a polygyne or multi-queen colony, are the queens all sisters, or did they all sort of, they're non-relations that all sort of established the colony together? How does that work?
So oftentimes it will be non-sisters and social insects, and it really depends on the type of social insect. There is colony founding where all the queens will come from the same colony or the same area and go and found a nest together. And then there's also, it also occurs where queens will find an already established nest and sort of join that.
Interesting.
Nest. Yeah.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not necessarily, they're almost usually not related, but they work together. And so that means that all of their offspring are not related either, but they're also working. That's really interesting. That sort of changes everything that I thought I knew about ants.
Yeah,
I like that.
Well, it's a really interesting evolutionary question, actually. Why would there be the evolution of the social form where you have workers who are not sisters, who are nestmates, and they're working together in a cooperative nature to accomplish tasks for the colony.
Especially because that means that they're raising brood that are not related to them.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I know, right? And I'm studying this in yellow jackets as well.
Oh.
I'm doing a project looking at this same exact system over in Hawaii. So there's a species of yellow jacket that invaded there about a century ago. So relatively recently in evolutionary time. And that species, it's Vespula pennsylvanica, the western yellow jacket, and it's native along the west coast of the United States, so Oregon down through California, and here for the most part, at least in the northern extents of the range, it's monogyne, so single queen. There are some polygyne colonies popping up in Southern California, but whenever it invaded in Hawaii, those colonies are, for the most part, all polygyne. And so once again, we have this transition to a more, I guess, complex social form over there in Hawaii, and we're trying to figure out why that is and why that might be an environment where this polygyne social form can proliferate over there. And so these nests over there, they're a really big pest to humans, and they're also taking over a lot of the arthropod population. These wasps are big predators over there. And the nests and the colonies are just huge. I mean, hundreds of thousands of workers. And so it's a pretty intense situation. So once again, we went over and we collected colonies and sequenced those individuals, and we're looking at we're using those sequences to figure out who's related within those colonies to get a good idea of how many queens are in the colonies, and then see if these queens are cooperating or not cooperating. And the way that we're sort of looking at that is how they're partitioning their reproduction amongst the different castes of the colonies.
Okay.
So there are some queens that are sort of just hanging out and not really reproducing workers, and maybe just reproducing some other reproductive individuals, therefore increasing their own fitness as much as possible? Or are all of the queens really producing workers to the same extent and sharing that workload, I guess? Because a workload for a queen is really just their reproductive output.
So it's like a continuum between fully cooperative and fully selfish. Is that interesting? Yeah. So we're working on the data right now, and we're trying to figure that out. And it's one piece in this larger puzzle of how are these wasps so successful over there?
why is this polygynous social form advantageous in this environment? What can we do about it because they're a pest? So similar questions and ants with this like social form thing.
So with both of these insects, both with the Formica ants and with these yellow jackets, are you, when you say there's something in the environment that might be selecting for the multi-queen strategy, is it something in the environment as in like abiotic factors like precipitation or temperature or something, or is it biotic factors like resources that you're interested in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For the most part, we've mostly been looking at abiotic factors, and that's what I'm focusing on for my research. But there very well could be biotic factors as well. So like one idea is that polygyny might be more advantageous in a sort of harsher climate, whether that's due to temperature or precipitation or whatever else, because queens can go and they can join an already formed colony a lot faster and easier than going off on their own and starting a colony on your own, where you don't have a very high likelihood of surviving, I guess, out there when you have to like mate and then go like dig a nest and then start the whole thing and be successful at that. And so also but another sort of constraint, and this is more of a biotic constraint, might be in areas where there's nest site limitation. So areas that are already really saturated with nests, there might not be, because it's a really great abiotic environment, there might not be really enough space or resources for you to start a nest on your own. Therefore, it might be more advantageous for polygyny to have evolved in a population like that. So there are different reasons why, or hypotheses why this might be a thing. And it gets down to the whole environment, both abiotic and biotic.
Awesome. That's really cool research. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I like it because it gets at the sort of like sociality aspect of social insects, but also another reason why people study them and why they're really important on Earth is because of their ecological significance. Yeah.
Very cool. So you teased this a little bit before, but I always like to go back and sort of ask people like how they got to where they are now. So you said you liked insects as a kid, but like why did you decide that insects or biology was the thing that you were going to study for and like make your career? And also like why did you decide to go to grad school? So I did really love insects as a kid, but it might sound like I was just always wanted to be an entomologist, but that wasn't necessarily the case. If you asked me when I was a kid, like 10 or something, what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have said entomologist. Honestly, I had like all these insect books and stuff. I was super into it. That's awesome.
I know, but you know, like you grow up and you're exposed to all these different things in the world, and I think I didn't really forget about my love of insects, but I just started exploring other things and got interested more in like art and other types of science, and I don't know. In high school, I was pretty into math and science, and people were like, oh yeah, you're into math and science, you should go into engineering. That would be like a really useful thing. And so I did go into undergrad studying engineering. I was studying environmental engineering because once again, I really like the environmental aspect of things, but I was just like, yeah, this is the thing to do. But I ended up switching over to studying ecology and evolutionary biology about halfway through college, mostly just because, well, for a couple reasons. First of all, I didn't love my peers, which, I mean, I have a lot of really awesome, outstanding friends from that time in my life who are engineers now, so obviously not across the board, but for the most part in classes I just felt like it was sort of a really competitive environment and people who were out sort of like for themselves and not exactly super collaborative. So that's one thing. I mean, it's hard to get into a field whenever you don't feel like it's your people. And then also, I don't know, I just wasn't really as inspired by that work as I thought I would be, and I found myself looking at the university like course catalog being like, man, I wish I could take all these classes that the biology people are taking. They look like they're having so much fun going outside. I know. And then people are like, but you can. So I'm like, yes, I will switch. But yeah, and once I switched my major, it was like, oh, this is what I was meant to do, because it really like got back to who I am at the core, where I love just going outside and observing the natural world and learning about that. So that was great. And then I'd say the rest of it, I mean, my whole life really is just a series of good fortune and good luck and being in the right place at the right time. I didn't really do anything in particular, I guess, for myself, but like I ended up finding my way into this course that was an animal behavior course, and the professor, he is Mike Breed, who he just retired, but he was a social insect professor at University of Colorado Boulder, where I did my undergraduate education, and he was the professor. And so in this class he was bringing all these examples of social insect behavior, so honeybee behavior and ant behavior, and I was like, wait, I love this stuff. Like, it just brought me back to what I had loved throughout my whole childhood. And so it was really, really cool to see that. And it didn't at all occur to me that people do this for their career. Like, I was so I know. I was like, wait, people actually study insects for their job and get paid for it? What is this? I didn't even really realize that people do like research for their career. I was so, I didn't really understand any of that.
Yeah, it's not a career that a lot of people like hear about when you're in high school.
I was like, well, this would be a fantasy to like study the natural world for your job, but people don't really do that. So anyway, I was really inspired by him, and then ended up through him doing ant research that summer. Once again, because he was retiring, I think it was just really good timing, because he really was able to give me the time and mentorship that I needed. Not only, I mean, I know he was a very busy guy, but he was really, for an undergraduate, able to give me this like individualized attention. And because he was towards the end of his career, he was just this really amazing mentor, I think, that he had developed himself into over many years. And so I was just super lucky to fall into his hands, and he allowed me to develop this whole research project looking at essentially what I'm studying today on a smaller scale, obviously, at how ants impact soil environments with Formica ants. It's like a similar species actually that I'm studying right now. And so that was just really great. So I did like my own undergraduate research thesis, and once again he was like, so do you want to go to grad school? And I was like, oh, I haven't thought about it before. I had no idea that people really did PhDs, or that you could do a PhD instead of a master's, or why you would want to do that. So through his mentorship, I applied to grad school, and he also took me to my first meeting, which was, just like a one-day meeting for the North American section of the International Union for the Study of Social Insects. And so it was essentially, I know, just this like one-day thing where there were all these social insect people, and I just presented a poster there. But I went there, and it was like, there's all these people who get excited about this stuff too. These are my people. It's one of those moments where you realize who your people are and why that really matters. Being around people who are excited about the same things that you are. And just that energy is really amazing. So when I was there, I ended up meeting a contact who led me to my current PI, Jessica Purcell at University of California, Riverside, who has also been a really amazing mentor. And I just ended up here, and my department at UCR is also incredibly, everyone there is incredibly supportive and collaborative, and it's another instance where you find yourself in a place where just the people are right, and that makes everything better. At the end of the day, it doesn't really come down to what you're studying, I think, as long as you have people who get excited about, in general, like the systems that you're working on, and who can support you as a researcher, it makes all the difference. And you can do like whatever you want to. So there's really amazing people there. So anyway, I found myself back in my first love of insects, and things have worked out in a really awesome way.
That's awesome. I love it. That's amazing. Yeah, I loved what you said about like finding your people and talking about mentors that were really valuable to you. So like, yeah, like what does that mean? Like, you know, why does the research community or the entomology community feel like your people, and like why does that, like what exactly about it makes it a place that you want to stay?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be different for everyone. The people who are really, who just sort of mesh with you, you know, that I think, you know, I mentioned before the engineering community, and like I know that's a really amazing community. Like my partner is an engineer, and I don't mean at all to like bash those people, but for me it's just like there's something that didn't really mesh about it, whereas like for entomologists it did. And just sort of, I think it's important to have like-minded people, but even here, like I love coming to the entomology meetings every year because everyone is just really collaborative, really nice, willing to talk to you no matter what level you are. There's not this separation between students and faculty members, and I think there's something about entomologists where a lot of them are these people who love going out in the field, getting their hands dirty, like going on crazy adventures. It doesn't, I mean, I'll be out in the field and there's ants like crawling all over me, and people, my undergrads or whatever, are like, yeah, this is awesome. So I love like that community of people who aren't afraid to just sort of like jump in, get your hands dirty, see what happens. And to me that really sort of describes entomologists as a whole. And they're really creative people too. I mean, we come to these conferences and there's people who are like have their art projects going on, and they develop these experiments and studies.
Yeah, do you think it's also a little bit because like insects are so diverse, right? There are so many different kinds, and like you said, they live on basically every continent and most islands. Like we have so many choices. I would say there are basically as many different kinds of person in entomology as there are kinds of insects, right?
That's true, yeah. I mean, and I don't mean to say that I come to these conferences and everyone looks like me and is the same sort of person as me. That's not it at all. It's I love the diversity of entomologists out there, both in where people come from physically in the world and like their world views, but also in what they do, what they're into, and I end up connecting with people who, you would never think that like we would ever cross paths or be friends, but it ends up we're really kindred spirits because of common things in entomology that connect us. It's not really fun.
It's not that the conference is full of all of the same kind of person.
No. In fact, I would really hate being around like a group like that.
It would be boring.
Yeah, it'd be really boring.
Well, speaking of diversity, one of the myriad reasons that I do explain yourself is because I think it's really important for us to talk about how literally anyone can and should become a scientist if it's what they're passionate about. So we talk about the diversity within our interviewees or our guests as well. So we're both women in science, and if there are any other sort of, I guess I've been calling them diversity checkboxes that you feel like that you identify with, or like, you know, diverse background characteristics that you might have, how have those things, any diversities that you identify with, sort of shaped your journey through entomology and being part of the scientific and research community?
I don't feel like I really check a lot of diversity check boxes. Being a woman in science is definitely an experience. I don't feel like I have it as hard as some women who are in fields like physics or mathematics, or even a lot of engineering fields where women are much less represented. Honestly, at least like in my graduate in my department, in my graduate program, there is more women than men actually. So I don't at all feel like I'm this person who stands out a lot. But you know, it certainly is a hurdle to overcome growing up. I went to a all-girls high school, and that was actually a really incredible experience because not because there were no men there, but because there was this community of women there who were really, really supportive of each other. I don't know why, but like whenever you just stick a bunch of girls together in an environment like that, they really bring each other up. And so I was just taught all throughout high school, like you can go and you can do whatever you want to do and be a leader in whatever field you want to.
That's astounding. Wow.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter like what gender you identify as in the world, like you can do this. So I think that experience really set me up for success, and I come back to that a lot just in my life, back to how fortunate I was in that high school experience. Honestly, I recognize my privilege as a white person who has grown up in the United States, and I go to, University of California, Riverside is a minority serving institution. So we have people of all different backgrounds there, and I think that that's a really incredible, enriching environment, and I'm trying to do what I can in whatever ways to educate myself about people of these different backgrounds and what challenges they are overcoming to be able to be in STEM fields, because I think that there's challenges that I couldn't even foresee whenever there's the obvious things, but there's also like, okay, if English is not your first language, it's not only that you might not write as well and therefore might not get your paper accepted, or you might not be able to get as good of a grade in an English class. But there's also things like it takes you so many times longer to read a paper or write a paper than someone who has English as their first native language. And so therefore deadlines might be a lot harder for you to reach. Things like that. Journals, whenever you're submitting to a journal, oftentimes they'll give you the feedback that you need to go and find an English-speaking person to proofread your paper, but like, why aren't the journals taking more of this upon themselves to help proofread these papers and correct for grammatical errors? Things like that I think are just systemic issues that we need to change. I'm trying to figure out what my part is in helping change these things. So yeah, I guess like I don't check a lot of diversity boxes, and I recognize that I'm really privileged to be in the position that I am in. I think where I've gotten to so far has been 99% luck, and then like some hard work in there too. I work hard on a daily basis, but like everyone does, you know.
So you did mention your undergrads before, so I guess you have undergrad field assistants who go out and help you sample ants and things. Yeah, so with the fact that your university is a minority serving institution, have you sort of used things that you learned from your really great mentors, both your PhD advisor and your undergraduate advisor, to sort of help foster your undergraduate field assistants? Because I'm assuming that because your university is a minority serving institution, that you might be given the opportunity to help boost people who might not, as you said, have realized that this was a career path before coming there. I mean, as a mentor, and I'm relatively new to mentoring, this is my third year as a PhD student, and so I'm learning lots all the time, and I anticipate continuing to learn about what it means to be a good mentor for my whole career, whatever that may be. But yeah, I always put myself in the place of the students, and I think, okay, what was it like to be an undergraduate? I had no clue what was going on all the time and like what it means to be a scientist. So yeah, I really have to put myself in that position all the time, and I try to explain things the best I can in that mindset of, you know, they're coming at this for the first time. Things that are obvious to me might not be obvious to them. And yeah, I think about the mentors that I have had and have currently, and they are by far just the most important people in my life and who contribute to the success of me as a student. I mean, I would be like nowhere without
both Mike and Jessica, who I mentioned, but many other mentors who I've had throughout my education and also just my life. And I always am reminded of how the things that they did with mentoring me and continue to do, and where I would be without them, which is, I have no idea where, but nowhere good. And so it's an incredible experience to be able to help other people get to these places and to be a mentor. And so I love working with undergraduates, and once again, because we are a minority serving institution, I know that many of them have experienced things in their life that I can't relate to at all. They're coming from places I can't relate to at all. But I think that creates, like I said before, a really enriching environment. And I love it.
That's awesome. So I also like to ask, because we've talked so much about your science and how you came to be a scientist, but our science does not necessarily define us. We are three-dimensional people. So is there anything that you like to share with people that is like different or might be surprising to them to know that you are a scientist and also? I am a scientist and also an artist. I mean, nothing super intense, but on a weekly basis, I try to find time in my schedule to do art. Oftentimes it's visual art like painting or photography. Sort of back to the reason why I got into insects in the first place. I'm really just drawn to the aesthetic nature of things. And I try to actually bring that into my science and create a cross-section there too. Nice. With science communication. That's a whole nother area of science that I'm really interested in. I think that it doesn't make any sense to be a researcher if you're not going to then go the extra mile. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. That's my favorite sentence, though. It is.
I know. Yes, and it's been awesome to collaborate with you on ComSciCon projects too.
Yes, that's the secret, is that we actually went to the same science communication conference in 2018. So
that's where we met. And then here at this entomology conference, we are putting on a workshop for graduate students about science communication, ComSciCon, entomology. So, little plug. Even though I don't think people are going to see this video before.
Nope, not before then, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Hopefully we'll run it again. So.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, we both know that that's really important, but I don't think everyone recognizes that. But something I like to do is, for whatever research I'm doing, sort of bring in a visual component to it that is aesthetically pleasing. So whether that's really working on the figures in the paper to make them nice, or making a really nice poster about the research, I just find that people can relate to your research more when they see it visually in a really appealing way. And that's just fun for me. Like at this conference, there's a new infographic competition thing, and so I signed up for that because I'm like, that'll be super fun to make an infographic about my work. So I like to combine science and art. And what's something really surprising? I don't know if there's anything really surprising about me. I like to do sort of like I don't know. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, so some things you might consider very Portland, like I really liked a hula hoop. I raised chickens growing up. I'm like obsessed about chicken farming. I don't have any right now because I'm like in this renting a place with other people in Riverside, but that's like what I aspire to in the future, is to just like have a bunch of chickens. Nice. That's really my peaceful place, watching chickens.
Oh goodness.
Crazy chicken person over here.
But chickens eat ants, don't they? Or they could.
Oh yeah, they do.
Oh no.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I like to travel a lot. I guess this is something I didn't mention that people are usually surprised about. I am involved in an organization called Engineers in Action, and I'm involved, and so this organization works with engineering students and gets them involved in hands-on projects in rural communities, mostly in Bolivia, but in some other countries too, like Swaziland, with engineering projects. And so as an undergraduate, even after, this was after I started studying ecology and evolutionary biology, I was involved in this team of students who went to Swaziland and built the country's first suspended pedestrian footbridge, which, I mean, a pedestrian footbridge doesn't sound like that much, but this was a 73-meter long footbridge that took about 3 months to build, and we raised all the money for it and did the design for it.
Whoa.
And there was this whole deal with, like, we had to find cables for the bridge and import the cables into the country and get all the materials there, and we worked with the community. We were living in this rural community in Swaziland to build this bridge in their community because they have a river flowing through the community, and people cross the river every single day to get where they need to be. A lot of the times that's young children who are crossing the river to go to school. I mean, I would see them and they would take their clothes off and hold everything above their head and cross this river, and people drown all the time. So we helped them build this bridge. It was really a team effort amongst all of us, and that was really amazing. So I did that the summer before I came to grad school, but I've continued to be involved in that, and I've brought sort of my love of science communication into that, and within this organization I've sort of started this program of getting the engineering students on these teams to be in the field collecting media, both in the form of photography and videos, and then turning that into media projects that they can share to help communicate the importance of their projects, just like we do as scientists. And so whether that's in the form of like photo essays or videos that they create about their projects, because one thing I noticed whenever I was in Swaziland, I was like, okay, like this is awesome, this is a really exciting project, but all of my teammates are engineers who don't really care about like taking pictures or anything like that, which is great because we need them to be like doing the construction management and things like that. But over here, me, like scientist, art person, I'm like, okay, I need to be like capturing this in a way that's going to be communicating these ideas to people in the future. So I really spent a lot of time capturing photos and videos of that project, and that has been successful in helping to raise money for future projects and things like that. So anyway, I've been involved in this like bridge organization. It's the Engineers in Action Bridge program.
Cool.
And we've gotten lots of other universities across the country involved. So I spend part of my time doing things with footbridges and engineers. Yeah.
That's cool. Wow. See, this is why I love doing these, because I always find out really interesting things about people. Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us, Madison. We really appreciated it.
Definitely. This has been fun.
We learned a lot about ants. It was great. If you liked this video, don't forget to like it. If you didn't like this video, please share it with someone who would. And if you'd like to support the Roving Naturalist, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon. Then go check out my Patreon page. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you really like nerdy science goodness, you can also check out my science-themed Dungeons & Dragons show, Nature Check. We play live on Twitch, and you can also find our episodes on YouTube and wherever you find podcasts. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.